graduated May of 2017. I was just given a recruiting talk on Tuesday. If we look familiar, then I am that guy. However, today I'm here on my own free will, so this is, I'm not representative of my employer or anything. So yeah, today I kind of wanted to give a similar talk to kind of similar to last year, if anybody remembers that, but just a little more coherent. It's still written down, still just a big rambling stream of consciousness, but it's not written on a parking ticket this time, so I got that going for me. So the title of the talk, quote unquote, is Social Sciences, Security, and You, and basically just trying to talk about my experience trying to see the whole big picture after I graduated, and some of my journeys and self-discovery along the way. So starting out, a little bit of background about myself. I was very technical in school. I really had a deep technical mindset where I enjoyed the CTFs and the reverse engineering and the all the cool tech stuff that's very, very flashy, exploit this and that kind of stuff. And I had a great time exploring that. But after sort of getting into the real world, taking my first few steps, like working a full-time job and doing all sorts of cool big boy things, I basically wanted to see the big picture, right? I wanted to sort of scope out from my security, technical domain, and sort of see how the big picture worked, see how all the rest of the things in the world worked. And that sort of got me on this tangent about reading about things like history and economics and psychology and politics and all that boring stuff that I didn't really have an interest to in school. And I started drawing a whole bunch of parallels with the stuff that I was reading and the information security world and sort of how it's all connected, and sort of found some powerful connections there that I'd like to share with you all today, and hopefully inspire you to take these things into account as you go through your security studies. So starting off, if you think about your OSI model, right? You got the data link and then the application and different order, right? This is why I failed this question on my interviews. But you've got this model where a whole bunch of stuff sits on a whole bunch of other stuff until you get to the very bottom, and it's the hardware, and you got all your other layers sitting on top of that. Very similar kind of thing with information security, right? Information security sort of sits on this bed of the whole other social sciences that allow this to happen, right? You think about security and psychology, right? The study of human behavior. That's literally the root cause of everything in information security, right? Just humans doing things. And the more we can understand human behavior, the better we can be at security as an industry, right? Thought leader stuff. That's why they gave me this thing. Big ideas up here. Economics, what motivates people to do things, and what are their the main drivers in getting people to do stuff. Again, really important to us as security, because people doing stuff, and necessarily bad stuff online with computers and internet and stuff, is what we're all in the business for, right? So that's what we're trying to protect against, or maybe trying to cause if you're one of those black hat people. But politics, it all welds into itself essentially. The root conclusion here was there's a whole bunch of stuff in security that we try and understand as an industry, and that we're sort of on the bleeding edge of, that all has a name and has been very well studied in these other fields of study in the social sciences, right? And we can't really escape that as information security. Even if that's something that you're not very interested in, it's still something that's going to be very relevant to you and your job. So comparing against other industries, we in InfoSec are in a very pioneering state, right? We haven't been doing this for a long time, and there's a whole bunch of unsolved problems in security, how do we measure things? How do we accurately forecast when things are going to happen? The standards and the institutions that are in other industries that have been established for a while, very well-known, engineering industries like aerospace, even, I was reading an article where it was comparing information security, risk forecasting, to things like weather forecasting, right? It may seem very different, but there's still a whole bunch of parallels in that we're trying to measure the same things, we're trying to predict things. But in security, we don't have a really well-established way to do that. And we can look into some of these other industries that have been doing this for a while and learn a lot about how we should take things on as an industry and how we should solve some of these problems. So yeah, like, comparing like risk and information security, how do we predict when things are going to happen? Like weather forecasters do that pretty much all the time, and they have a whole bunch of standards and metrics and ways that they can measure things and express their ideas and share data and collaborate with one another that like we're still trying to figure out within security. So kind of important to turn to these other fields that have been doing this for a while. So kind of tying this all together, like how is this relevant to you, right? Like even if you, if you're kind of like me and this wasn't your cup of tea in school and you're very interested in the technical kind of things, like this is still very important to you and your job. Even if it's not directly applicable to you, if you're doing, reverse engineering in a dark basement like I was for like most of my senior year, like all this stuff still exists and is still has a lot of weight on you. It's just going on above your head if you're not really aware that it's going on, right? If you want to get into management, if you want to be a director, if you want to be a CISO later on in your career, like these are all things that are very, very relevant to you and to the work that you're going to be doing. So like as an engineer, it's kind of important to understand how the work that you're doing is being used and sort of how that all fits into the big picture. And that's kind of a great way to understand that is by learning more about all the things that are going on over your head in terms of the, the politics and the economics of information security. So like wrapping this all up, like what is the takeaway here? Essentially, like having a well-rounded background is important, right? You can't really do your job in isolation from these things because they're always going to have an impact on what you're doing as a security professional, and they're going to be relevant to your job, right? As you learn about these things in your electives and in your concentrations and stuff, like don't like take a nap in the back of class every day because all this stuff is important later on. And I'm kind of kicking myself now because I didn't learn more about that stuff when I was in a great environment like college where I had the opportunity to literally take a class to focus on that kind of stuff, to learn more about it. So now I'd have to go and spend my weekends trying to get like doped up on coffee in coffee shops and trying to focus on these dense like books on this stuff rather than like having a professor explain it to me. So it's a really great opportunity that you guys have when you're in school to learn about these things and to try and just find those parallels with information security. It can be kind of fun and exciting, like the more conclusions you try and draw, because it is all connected to each other in the end. So, my ask is just to realize that this stuff is relevant to us and to maybe, take more of that into account as you go through the rest of your education, because it is all important in the end. So with that being said, thus concludes the rambling train of thought. Does anybody have any questions? Awesome. Sweet. Get this thing off the pumpkin now.